A cold breeze moved slowly across the quiet Starport Park as the evening lights turned soft and golden. Mark, a tired human single dad, sat alone on a metal bench with his rough hands resting on his knees. His work boots were covered in dust. His shirt had faint stains from lifting heavy bricks all day, and his back ached badly. He worked at a construction site not far from the park. Every evening before heading home, he would stop here to rest for a short while. In his lunchbox, only half of a sandwich was left. It was nothing special, just bread, cheese, and a slice of tomato. But to Mark, that sandwich was important. It was for his little boy, Sam. His son didn't like the school meals, so Mark always brought something from home for him. He had saved this sandwich all day, planning to give it to Sam as a small surprise when they got home. Mark leaned back on the bench looking at the sky. Several ships were flying above the city, their engines leaving quiet trails of light. The starport was always busy with different kinds of travelers. Some were human, some were alien. Over the years, it had become normal to see all kinds of faces here, some with wings, some with strange markings, and some with glowing eyes. Just as Mark let out a long breath, he heard a soft sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then it came again like a small, shaky whimper. He turned his head slowly. Near the big tree on the other side of the path, a little figure was sitting on the ground. It was a young girl, but she was not human. Her skin had a soft shine, covered with tiny golden scales that caught the light. Two small wings were folded tightly on her back. She had long silver hair that fell messily around her face, and her eyes glowed a soft amber. Her tail curled beside her, shaking slightly as if she was scared. Her hands were holding a broken toy, and she was quietly crying. Mark froze for a second. He had seen aliens before, but he had never seen a child like this. She looked so young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. She didn't seem dangerous. She looked lost. For a moment, Mark thought about walking away. He had a son waiting at home. He didn't have time for trouble. Someone else would probably help, but as he watched the little girl wipe her tears with the back of her tiny hand, something inside him stirred. He remembered the nights after his wife died. Sam had been so small then. He used to cry in the dark, calling out for her. Mark had sat beside his bed, holding his hand through those long nights. Seeing this alien child cry alone reminded him of those moments. Slowly, he stood up. His boots made a soft sound on the stone path as he walked closer. The girl noticed him and pulled her knees up, her wings tightening against her back. Her glowing eyes widened with fear. Mark stopped a few steps away. He didn't want to scare her. He knelt down on one knee to look less big. His voice was soft, the same way he talked to his son when Sam had nightmares. "Hey," he said gently, "are you okay?" The girl didn't answer. She just sniffled and held the broken toy closer to her chest. Her small shoulders shook as she tried not to cry louder. Mark could tell she didn't understand his words completely. She looked around nervously, like someone who had lost their way. Mark looked at her again. Her cheeks were wet with tears. Her lips trembled. She looked hungry. Then he looked down at the sandwich in his hand. He thought about Sam for a moment. Then he looked back at the girl. Without saying anything more, he slowly unwrapped the sandwich. The smell of bread and cheese filled the air. He held it out in front of her carefully, his hand steady so she wouldn't feel threatened. "Here," he said softly. "You can have this." The little girl blinked at the sandwich. Her small nose twitched and her wings fluttered just a little. She didn't move closer at first. She looked unsure, like she had never been given food by a stranger before. Mark didn't push. He just placed the sandwich carefully on the ground between them and slowly leaned back, giving her space. A few seconds passed. Then the girl crawled forward, her tail sliding softly behind her. She sniffed the sandwich once more. Very slowly, she picked it up in her small hands. Her claws were tiny and delicate like a baby dragon's. She looked at Mark again. He just gave her a warm, tired smile. She took a small bite. Her eyes grew wide. Then she took another. And another. She began to eat faster, like someone who hadn't eaten all day. Mark felt a strange warmth in his chest. He didn't know who she was or why she was here alone, but he was glad she wasn't crying anymore. As she finished the sandwich, she looked up at him again. This time there was no fear in her eyes, only surprise. Slowly, she stretched out her hand and touched the edge of his work jacket. It was a simple, small gesture, but to Mark it felt like trust. He smiled again. "Good sandwich, huh?" he whispered. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her wings relaxed and she let out a small, soft sound that almost sounded like a laugh. What Mark didn't know was that this little moment was not as private as he thought. High above the park, almost invisible, tiny drones floated in the air. Their cameras followed every movement carefully. Someone far away was watching everything on a big screen, a tall, powerful alien queen. It was her daughter sitting there on the ground. The little dragon girl was not just anyone. She was the heir of a royal house from another world. The queen had been searching for her for hours. Many people had walked past the crying girl. Some stared, some ignored her, but no one stopped. Except this tired human single dad with a dusty jacket and half a sandwich. The queen leaned closer to the screen, watching the way her daughter smiled softly for the first time that day. She gave no order to her guards yet. She wanted to see more. Back on the bench, Mark sat down beside the girl, not too close, just enough to make sure she wasn't alone anymore. The sun was setting behind the ships, painting the sky in warm colors. The little dragon girl leaned her head against his arm, tired but calm. Mark didn't know her name. He didn't know her world, but in that quiet, golden moment, none of that mattered. He just saw a lost child who needed kindness. The sun had almost disappeared behind the tall starport buildings when Mark decided he couldn't leave the little dragon girl alone. The city lights began to shine softly, making the streets glow in warm orange. It was getting late, and more ships were landing, filling the air with gentle rumbling sounds. The little girl sat close to Mark now, her small wings tucked neatly behind her. She looked tired, but she was no longer crying. Her face still had a few dry tear lines, and her cheeks were slightly pink from the cool evening air. The sandwich had calmed her down. She kept holding the broken toy in one hand and Mark's jacket sleeve with the other. It was as if she didn't want him to go. Mark watched the sky for a moment, thinking about his son Sam. He was supposed to be home by now. Sam would be waiting, sitting near the window, maybe asking their kind neighbor for the time. Mark felt a small pinch in his heart. He couldn't just walk away and leave the girl, but he also couldn't stay here forever. He turned his head toward her. "Hey, little one," he said gently, trying to sound friendly. "Where's your family?" The girl tilted her head, her amber eyes wide and bright. She didn't seem to understand the words. She only blinked a few times and then whispered a single soft word. "Mama." Mark understood that word. It made him stop for a second. She wasn't just lost, she was looking for her mother. "Okay," he said quietly, nodding slowly. "We'll find her." He stood up carefully so he wouldn't scare her. For a second, she held his jacket tighter. He gave her a warm smile. "I'm not leaving you, kid," he whispered. He offered his hand gently. She stared at it for a moment, then reached out with her tiny clawed fingers and placed them in his. Her hand was warm. They started walking slowly toward the starport help station nearby. Mark's steps were heavy from work, but he didn't complain. The little girl walked close beside him, sometimes stumbling a little but never letting go of his hand. People passed by them on the sidewalk, busy with their own lives. A few gave curious glances at the dragon child, but no one stopped. Mark noticed how she looked at everything with wide eyes, like someone far away from home. Bright lights, big screens, and the sound of ship engines seemed to scare her. Each time she flinched, Mark gave her hand a little squeeze to remind her she wasn't alone. When they reached the station, he opened the door and guided her inside. The place was bright and warm. A human woman sat at the counter looking tired. She had probably seen hundreds of travelers that day. When she saw the little girl with Mark, her eyebrows rose in surprise. "Evening," Mark said politely. "I found her crying near the park." "She's lost," the woman leaned forward, her face softening. "Oh, poor thing," she said. "She looks like one of those royal visitors from the dragon system. They arrived this morning with a big security team. Maybe she got separated." Mark didn't know much about royal families, but the word royal made him nervous. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, she was alone. I couldn't just leave her there." The woman nodded. She picked up her communicator and began making calls. Meanwhile, the little dragon girl stayed close to Mark's leg. She looked around the room with curious but nervous eyes. Mark could feel her tiny claws gently holding on to the fabric of his work pants. Minutes passed. Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. The woman at the counter looked a little pale now. "Sir," she said slowly, "the royal security team is already searching for her. They're sending their people here right now. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure what that meant. Royal security sounded serious. Too serious for a tired construction worker. He wasn't trying to cause trouble. He just gave a sandwich to a crying kid. The little girl suddenly made a soft sound like a small purr. Mark looked down and saw her trying to show him the broken toy she had been holding all this time. It was a small figure with wings like hers. One wing had snapped off. She pressed the toy against his palm as if asking him to fix it. Mark gently held the toy, looked at the broken part, and smiled softly. "I'll try," he whispered. He pulled out a bit of tape from the counter and carefully fixed the wing as best as he could. It wasn't perfect, but it stayed together. When he handed it back to her, her face lit up like a tiny star. She hugged the toy to her chest and let out a soft, happy sound. For the first time, Mark saw her smile. It wasn't a big smile. It was small and shy, but real. It warmed his tired heart more than he expected. Just then, the door of the help station slid open with a sharp hiss. Several tall figures in shining silver armor stepped in. Their wings were large and strong, their glowing eyes scanning the room carefully. People in the station stepped back quietly, unsure of what was happening. The leader of the royal guards walked forward. His armor had a royal emblem on the chest, shaped like a dragon's wing. He looked powerful, serious, and alert. Behind him, other guards moved like silent shadows. Mark instinctively moved a little in front of the girl without thinking. He didn't know who these people were, but something inside him told him to make sure she wasn't scared again. The little girl peeked from behind him. When she saw the guards, her eyes filled with sudden tears. But then something surprising happened. She didn't run to them right away. Instead, she held onto Mark's leg even tighter. The leader of the guards slowly lowered himself to one knee, speaking in their language. The little girl listened, but she didn't move. She only looked up at Mark. The guard tapped his wrist communicator and then spoke in broken English. "The Queen wants to see you. Thanks you." Mark blinked in confusion. "The Queen?" he repeated quietly. The guard nodded once. "You saved the air." Mark didn't know what to say. He wasn't a hero. He was just a tired dad who shared his food. But the little girl reached up and took his hand again. She was still scared but trusted him. That trust was clear in her eyes. The guards slowly approached and wrapped a soft silver blanket around the child's shoulders. One of them tried to pick her up, but she held on to Mark's hand, refusing to let go. The leader looked at Mark again. "She wants you to come," he said simply. Mark took a deep breath. This was far bigger than anything he had expected. But when he saw her little hand holding his like it was the safest thing in the world, he couldn't just walk away. "All right," he said finally. "I'll go." Outside, a royal transport hovered near the curb. The guards walked in a formation, moving with quiet power. The little dragon girl stayed beside Mark, still holding his hand. People on the street stopped to stare. Some whispered. As the transport doors opened, Mark looked back one last time at the quiet park where everything had started with a single sandwich. He didn't know what waited ahead, but deep inside he felt something special had begun. High above the city, in a secured royal command room, the Queen watched every step through her drones. Her cold, serious face softened slightly when she saw her daughter holding the human's hand. For the first time that day, her heart felt calm. She whispered quietly to her guards, "Bring him to me." And far below, unaware of how big this moment really was, Mark stepped into a royal ship beside a little dragon girl who trusted him more than anyone else. The night sky above the starport shimmered with soft blue lights as the royal transport lifted gently from the ground. The ship moved smoothly through the air, its engines silent and powerful. Inside, the atmosphere was calm but tense. Mark sat on a smooth silver seat, his rough work boots making a small sound against the clean floor. He had never been inside a royal ship before. Everything around him looked too perfect. Shining walls, glowing panels, soft golden lights. Even the air smelled clean, like fresh rain. Across from him sat 3 royal guards in shining armor. They didn't speak much. Their eyes stayed sharp, focused on everything. Beside him sat the little dragon girl wrapped in a silver blanket. She looked much calmer now. Her small wings rested against the seat, and she still held her broken toy close to her chest. Every few seconds, she glanced up at Mark with those warm amber eyes, as if to make sure he was still there. Mark tried to give her a small smile. "We're going to find your mama," he whispered softly. She didn't fully understand the words, but she understood the gentle tone. Her small hand moved slowly until it touched the edge of his jacket again. She held on to it just like she had in the park. Outside the window, the city lights grew smaller and smaller. Mark could see the royal palace shining in the distance. It wasn't like any building he had ever seen. It looked like a mountain made of silver and crystal, glowing softly against the night sky. His heart began to beat faster. He was just an ordinary construction worker, a single dad who lived in a small apartment. He didn't belong in a place like this. He had only given a sandwich to a crying child. How did things become so big so fast? The royal transport landed on a smooth platform with golden lights. Guards stood in a straight line, their wings folded neatly behind them. They all looked serious. Mark took a slow breath as the doors opened. One guard stepped forward and said in broken but careful English, "The Queen is waiting." Mark looked down at the little girl. She held his hand tighter. Together they walked down the ramp surrounded by royal guards. The wind was cool and soft, carrying the scent of flowers and night air. As they walked through the grand halls of the palace, Mark's eyes couldn't stop moving. Tall pillars lined the sides of the hallway. The floor shone like a mirror. The walls had carvings of dragons flying through stars. Even the ceiling was painted with bright galaxies. He felt like he had stepped into another world. The little dragon girl walked proudly now, still holding his hand. Everyone they passed bowed slightly to her. Mark realized more and more how important she was. She wasn't just any child. She was a princess. Finally, they reached a set of giant silver doors. Two guards pushed them open slowly. Beyond the doors was a huge throne room. At the center of the room sat the queen. She was tall, graceful, and strong. Her wings were wide and beautiful, with shining patterns that looked like flames frozen in light. Her golden eyes were calm but powerful, like she could see everything. Around her stood advisors and more guards, their armor glowing softly in the light. The moment the little girl saw her mother, she let go of Mark's hand and ran forward. Her wings fluttered as she cried out a soft, happy sound. The queen stood from her throne and knelt to catch her daughter in her arms. She wrapped her gently in her wings, holding her close. Mark watched silently. It was a warm and quiet reunion. The queen closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, as if she had finally found the piece of her heart that had been missing all day. But what surprised Mark was that after hugging her mother, the little girl turned around and ran back to him. She grabbed his hand again, refusing to let go. She wanted him close. The queen noticed this. Her golden eyes focused on Mark. The entire room became silent. Everyone stared at the human man in the dusty jacket and boots. One of the guards spoke softly in their language, but the queen lifted her hand to silence him. She stepped down from her throne and walked toward Mark slowly. Her presence was strong, but there was no anger in her eyes, only curiosity. She stopped in front of him. Even though she was taller, she didn't look down on him like he was nothing. Instead, she lowered herself slightly so their eyes were closer. "You gave my daughter food," she said in clear English. Her voice was smooth but powerful. Mark nodded slowly, unsure how to act in front of a queen. "She was crying. She looked hungry," he said softly. "I just helped." The queen glanced at her daughter, who was still holding his hand and smiling shyly. "Many people saw her," the queen said. "Many people walked away. You did not." Mark didn't know how to answer. He just shrugged lightly. "She reminded me of my own kid," he admitted honestly. The queen's expression softened. She placed a hand on her daughter's head gently. "She calls you warm man," she said. Mark blinked in surprise. "Warm man?" The queen nodded slowly. That is what she felt, warmth, safety. "My daughter does not give trust easily. She trusts you." The hall was silent again. Some guards exchanged surprised looks. The queen had a reputation for being strong and strict. No one expected her to speak so softly to a stranger. Mark rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "I didn't do anything special," he said honestly. "I just gave her my sandwich." The queen's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Sometimes," she said, "a small thing is not small at all." She turned and gave a quiet order to her guards. One of them stepped forward carrying a small silver box. He opened it carefully. Inside was a golden medallion with the royal crest. "This is the highest symbol of kindness in our house," the queen said. "Very few ever receive it. I offer it to you not because you are a soldier or a hero, but because you were kind." Mark didn't know what to do. He wasn't used to medals or awards. He worked, cooked for his son, paid the bills, and lived quietly. But he carefully accepted the medallion, holding it gently like something fragile. The Queen nodded once. "You will be escorted home," she said. "But know this, human, you have made a friend in this palace. And my daughter has made a friend in you." The little girl beamed with joy. She squeezed his hand again, not wanting to let go. As the guards prepared to escort him, the Queen leaned down to her daughter and whispered something softly in their language. The little dragon girl suddenly ran forward and hugged Mark tightly around his middle. For a moment he stood still in surprise. Then he slowly hugged her back. The Queen watched the simple scene quietly. In her long years as a ruler, she had seen countless battles, speeches, and official ceremonies. But this quiet moment, a human giving warmth to her child, touched her more than she expected. As Mark walked out of the grand hall surrounded by guards, he looked down at the little golden medallion in his hand. He didn't fully understand how much this night had changed, but something told him life would never be the same again. And back in the throne room, the Queen held her daughter close, whispering softly, "He will not be forgotten." The royal palace looked even more beautiful when the morning sun touched its silver walls. Golden light spilled through the tall glass windows, making everything glow softly. Birds from the royal gardens flew past the balcony, their wings shining in the sunlight. It was quiet and peaceful inside, but Mark's heart was still beating a little faster than usual. He had not slept much after last night. The memory of standing in front of a real alien queen still felt unreal. All he had done was give a small sandwich to a crying girl. But that one moment had brought him into a royal palace, surrounded by guards, medals, and a queen's gaze. Mark stood at the edge of the palace garden with a cup of warm water in his hand. A kind palace worker had offered it to him earlier. He didn't really know what to do or say. Everything around him felt too clean, too shiny, too perfect. He kept thinking about his son Sam back home, probably sitting near the window, wondering where his father had gone. Behind him, a small and familiar sound made him turn. The little dragon girl was walking toward him. She wore soft white clothes now. Her hair brushed neatly and her wings looked brighter under the morning light. But her smile was still the same shy, sweet smile he had seen in the park. She ran the last few steps and stopped right in front of him, looking up with her big amber eyes. In her tiny hands, she held the same broken toy he had fixed the night before. She lifted it proudly like it was her favorite treasure. Mark smiled and bent down slightly. "Hey, little one," he said softly. "You found me again." She nodded quickly, even though she didn't understand every word. Then, without saying anything, she reached out and took his hand again, just like she had the night before. Her warm little hand fit perfectly in his rough one. Mark didn't know it, but the Queen was standing on the balcony above, watching everything quietly. She had not forgotten how her daughter had trusted this human so easily. To her, trust was something rare and powerful. A royal guard approached Mark politely and said, "The Queen wants to meet again." Mark nodded slowly. He followed them down the elegant hallway with the little girl still holding his hand. The floors shone like water. The walls carried pictures of stars and dragons, and the smell of soft flowers filled the air. It felt nothing like his small, noisy apartment back home. When they reached the throne room, the Queen was already waiting. She was dressed in a deep red robe today, her wings folded neatly behind her. Her crown shone softly in the golden light. She looked both powerful and calm. The little girl ran to her mother first, hugging her around the waist. The Queen gently touched her daughter's hair, then looked at Mark. "Human," she said in a clear and warm voice, "I wish to speak with you again." Mark stood straight, still feeling a little awkward in front of her. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said carefully. She slowly stepped down from her throne just like she had done the night before. But this time her steps were softer, more personal. "I watched you," she said. "You gave food to my daughter when no one else did. You walked with her when others stayed away. For you, it was a small thing. For me, it was everything." Mark swallowed slowly. He had never been thanked like this before, especially not by someone so powerful. The Queen continued, "My daughter lost her way because of a security mistake. For hours, my people searched for her. She was scared. But when she met you, she smiled again. You gave her something no amount of power can buy." She paused and looked at him with quiet eyes. "You gave her warmth." The hall was silent except for the sound of soft wind outside. Mark didn't know what to say. He wasn't a hero. He didn't do things for rewards. He just did what felt right. The Queen gave a small nod to one of her advisors. A table was brought forward with different royal gifts. A gold card of honor, a box filled with shining coins, a special permit for free travel between planets. These were things most people could only dream of. "These are for you," the Queen said gently, "a way to thank you." But Mark shook his head softly. "I can't take all this," he said. "I didn't do it for rewards. She was just a little girl. I couldn't walk away." The Queen studied him carefully. Most people would grab such gifts in a second, but this man didn't even look tempted. It made her respect him more. She lowered her voice. "Then tell me," she said slowly, "is there anything your heart needs?" Mark thought of Sam. He thought of their small life together. The cracked walls, the secondhand furniture, the nights when he had to work extra just to make sure his son had food. He didn't need gold. He didn't need medals. He just needed his little boy to be safe and happy. He shook his head again. "I don't need anything, Your Majesty," he said quietly. "I just want to go home to my son." The Queen's eyes softened even more. She nodded slowly. "A father," she said softly. "I understand." Then something unexpected happened. The Queen knelt down in front of her daughter and said something in their language. The little girl turned to Mark with shining eyes. She ran forward and wrapped her arms tightly around his waist. She didn't want him to leave. Mark bent down slowly and hugged her back, gentle and warm. Her wings brushed lightly against his arms. He could feel how much she trusted him. The Queen watched in silence. She had seen her daughter hide behind royal guards before. She had seen her cry, refuse lessons, and run from strangers. But never had she seen her hold someone like this. After a moment, the Queen said softly, "She wishes to see you again. If you allow it, I would like to arrange visits. My daughter has chosen you as her friend." Mark blinked, surprised but touched. "Visits?" he repeated softly. The Queen nodded. "She smiles with you. That is rare. If you agree, she may visit your world. Under our protection, of course." Mark thought of his son. He imagined how surprised Sam would be to meet a little dragon princess. But more than that, he thought about the shy smile on her face, the trust in her eyes. How could he say no to that? He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "She's welcome." The Queen's lips curved into a small, graceful smile. "Then it is decided," she said. "The bond of kindness will be honored." Later that day, a royal shuttle took Mark home. But he was no longer just a tired single dad who gave away a sandwich. Now he carried something more, a connection that crossed two worlds. As the shuttle landed near his small apartment building, Mark saw his son Sam running toward him. "Dad!" the boy shouted with joy. Mark picked him up, holding him tightly. The world around him felt simple again, but something had changed deep inside. Far away, in the royal palace, the little dragon princess stood on the balcony, looking at the sky with her broken toy still in her hands. She whispered something softly in her language, a promise to see him again. The Queen stood behind her watching the stars. She knew this human was different, and so did her daughter. What began with a single sandwich hay. The sun was shining softly over the small neighborhood when Mark walked down the street holding a bag of groceries. Birds were sitting on the wires, singing their usual songs. It was a normal morning. The kind of morning Mark had lived hundreds of times. But this time something inside him felt different. It had been several days since that unforgettable night at the starport. The image of the little dragon girl sitting alone under the tree was still fresh in his mind. He remembered the way she had cried softly, the way her little hand had held his jacket, and the way her eyes had sparkled when she smiled at him for the first time. Now, as he unlocked the door to his small apartment, the sound of his son's laughter filled the air. Sam was sitting near the window playing with a small paper plane. His eyes brightened the moment he saw his father. "Dad!" Sam ran to him and wrapped his arms around Mark's waist. Mark hugged him tightly, grateful to be home. "I brought you your favorite bread," Mark said with a smile, lifting the grocery bag. Sam grinned wide. Their life had always been simple. It wasn't perfect, but they had each other. That was enough. But something new was about to enter that quiet life. Later that afternoon, Mark received a soft knock at the door. When he opened it, two royal guards stood outside, calm, respectful, and serious. Behind them, a small silver transport hovered quietly. Mark's heart skipped a beat. He already knew what this was about. The little dragon girl stepped out slowly. She wore a soft blue outfit and had a small flower tucked behind one of her pointy ears. Her wings fluttered nervously, and she held the same broken toy he had fixed for her. The moment she saw him, her face lit up with the biggest smile. She ran toward him with small steps and hugged his leg tightly. Sam peeked out from behind Mark, his eyes wide in surprise. He had never seen a little dragon girl before. "Dad," Sam whispered. "Is she real?" Mark laughed softly and nodded. "Yeah, buddy. She's real. And she's our friend." The little princess turned toward Sam and tilted her head curiously. Her amber eyes sparkled as she lifted the broken toy in the air proudly, showing it to him like it was a prize. Sam laughed shyly. Within minutes, the two of them were sitting on the floor playing with toy blocks. Even though they didn't speak the same language, they laughed together like they had known each other forever. The royal guard stood outside the apartment quietly, giving them space. They were under strict orders from the Queen not to disturb the children. Mark stood near the window watching them play. A soft warmth filled his chest. It had been a long time since he had seen Sam so happy. He had lost his mother at such a young age, and many days had felt quiet and heavy. But now the room was filled with the sound of laughter. It felt alive again. As the days passed, the princess visited more often. Sometimes she came with small gifts from her world. A glowing crystal pebble, a soft blue feather, or little fruit candies shaped like stars. Other times she just came to play. She learned a few human words slowly. One of the first words she said clearly was Sam. The second was warm. Sam, in return, started picking up a few alien words too. He tried his best to pronounce them, often making her laugh. The bond between them grew quickly, pure and gentle. Mark often sat quietly with a cup of coffee, watching them play. He never imagined that a small act of kindness could bring something like this into his life. The little princess had become a part of their days, but the changes weren't only inside their home. Word had spread throughout the city. People whispered about the human man who gave food to a lost alien child and was later invited to meet the Queen. Some didn't believe it at first, but others saw it as a story of hope. The royal family also treated Mark with quiet respect. A small medal wasn't all they gave. Whenever the princess visited, the royal guards greeted him politely, and sometimes he was invited to the palace as a guest, not as a stranger. One evening, when the sun was setting, Mark received another visit, not just from the princess, but from the Queen herself. Her royal transport landed softly in the street, and everyone in the neighborhood stepped outside, amazed by the sight. Mark felt a little nervous when he opened the door, but the Queen's face was calm and kind. She looked less like a ruler and more like a mother that day. "I wanted to see where my daughter smiles," she said in her smooth voice. Mark stepped aside to let her in. The princess was already playing with Sam. The Queen's golden eyes softened as she watched them. "She has changed since that day," the Queen said quietly. "She was shy, afraid to speak to strangers. But now she laughs every morning. That is because of you and your son." Mark looked down, feeling a little shy himself. "I didn't do anything special," he said softly. "I just gave her food." The Queen shook her head gently. "Kindness," she said, "is never small. It is the seed that grows into something strong." She then looked around the small apartment, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. She seemed to admire its warmth, the drawings on the wall, the small toys, the signs of a simple but loving home. Then she said something Mark didn't expect. "My daughter does not just see you as a friend," she said. "She sees you as someone safe. You gave her what no palace guard or royal wall could give that night: comfort." The Queen knelt down beside the princess and Sam. She gently placed her hand on both their shoulders. "Let this bond grow," she said softly, "between your world and mine, between your family and mine." Mark didn't fully know what to say, but deep in his heart he understood what she meant. A door had opened between two different lives, and it all began with one small sandwich. From that day on, visits became a part of their routine. Sometimes the princess and her royal team came quietly. Sometimes Mark and Sam were invited to the palace, where they walked through shining halls, ate sweet fruits from another planet, and watched the stars from high balconies. Sam and the princess became inseparable. They laughed, played, shared stories in broken words, and trusted each other fully. Mark's small life no longer felt ordinary. It wasn't because of the palace, the gifts, or the royal guards. It was because he saw something bright in his son's eyes again, and every time the little princess smiled at him, he remembered that kindness had power far beyond what people imagine. The queen often watched them from a distance, her heart calm. She had ruled with strength for many years, but now she learned something different, something warm. She learned that a single moment of kindness could build a bridge stronger than any wall. And on quiet nights, when the stars filled the sky, the little princess would look out of the palace window with her toy in her hands, whispering the word she had learned so clearly: warm. It was the word that changed everything. It was the word that connected a lonely human father, his brave little boy, and a dragon princess from another world.